Okay, now on to thinking and feeling, how we make decisions. So people who prefer thinking like to think of things objectively and not make it as personal. Folks who have a preference for feeling are more have a preference for being person-centered and value-based. Both have some very much use and rationale. And again, usually we can use both, but we not with equal ease. We usually have a preference for one over the other. So just kind of some ways to look at it is thinking. Some things that stand out to me are looking at it objectively, pros and cons, principles. Whereas with feeling, really kind of looking at harmony and relationships, thinking about the person and personal values as it relates to the situation. So here's a visual to kind of look at thinking versus feeling. Notice the arrow going outward for thinking, and then this dotted line going in. Whereas with feeling, you see the arrow going towards the person with an empathetic view. So objectivity versus empathy, thinking versus feeling is a way to visualize and see it, right? So a couple of great ways to associate it with keywords: thinking versus feeling, head versus heart, objective versus subjective. Those are some things that really have helped me understand it a little bit better. And remember, we use both, but we have a preference in terms of making these decisions, right? Now on to judging and perceiving, our attitude towards the external world. And one way to kind of look at this is that think about if you were on a vacation, right? And when you're on vacation, would you prefer to kind of have a planned itinerary of things to do and stick with it? Or would you rather kind of be spontaneous and see how it goes and do what you feel in the moment? That's a good way to kind of understand and look at judging versus perceiving, right? So we'll show you a quick example here of the differences. So we use both attitudes just like the others, but not with equal comfort. So folks who prefer judging really want to be organized and orderly, stick to a plan. Folks who prefer perceiving will look at things and want to experience the world, but not necessarily be organized. And I think these two words are very great in describing perceiving: spontaneity and flexibility versus planned, organized, and orderly. That's a really good way to understand it. And again, they're not necessarily good or bad one way or the other, and we have to use both attitudes, right? So judging folks, they might like to follow lists or plans and be organized and prefer structure. Perceiving folks might want more flexibility and spontaneity. Planning ahead for judging types. Perceiving types may want to like cram and do things last minute. So think of yourself like when you've got an essay due or something. Are you someone who really likes to plan and get it done and do the pre-writing, the brainstorming, the first draft, the second draft? Or are you someone who wants to wait till the 11th hour and get it done and gets a rush and is able to work well under pressure, right? So again, think about it as structure versus flexibility. Those are great ways to kind of help you understand too. So here's a visual for you. And you can see judging by looking at kind of the timelines and just kind of following the deadlines and timelines and checking kind of boxes. And then with perceiving, it's kind of all over the place, kind of going with the flow, but getting there. This is kind of more a direct, linear, guided way. And this is kind of more a way that is a little bit all over the map and flexible, but a spontaneous way to meet a deadline, right? Two very different ways. Okay. So, some keywords associated with judging and perceiving: organized versus flexible, decision versus information, planning versus waiting, deliberate versus spontaneous. So again, we don't use each with equal ease, so we have a preference for one or the other. So think about these things as we go. Again, we'll have your assessment results based on how you based on those assessments that you take, but you may also have your own perception of what you feel like your preference type will be, right? So it's really important to understand this in terms of the dichotomies, and it can help us understand what we're good at and our strengths, and also areas that we can improve or blind spots that we may have, right? So taking a look at the preference types, here they are again: extroversion, introversion, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, judging, and perceiving. And there are 16 potential combinations for personality types for folks, and all of us will likely fall into one of these 16 personality types, right? So as we go, you can ask yourself, are you in the right job or major? It shows that that your type can be a really good predictor of occupations that are attractive to personality types and preferences that you have, right? So you can actually use this not just as a way to think about, hey, am I in the right job, but also, am I in the right major? Is it a good fit for me as a major, right? So there are types in all occupations, and something that you want to remember is that this assessment, it's not 100% perfect. It is an assessment, and there are certain things it does not do, right? It measures preferences, but doesn't really talk about your skills, your abilities, your training, not so much hitting on your motivation and other factors. And these are also things that kind of come into play in terms of making a decision on your major and career. So what I like to do when working with students is kind of taking a holistic view of everything. So looking at skills, looking at abilities, looking at values, looking at interests, but also, your preferences can also play a factor. And by taking all of those things, you can make a very informed decision about what the right major or career is for you, right? And it's a tool that we can use to help us. Okay. So a couple of things to note and think about is that if you are doing things like in a job or in a major that are outside of your preference for a long period of time, it could lead to stress and burnout, right? So the question is, what is your tolerance level for that? How long are you willing to do that? Is the stress worth it? So again, the recommendation is to find things within your preferences to kind of really be the best fit for you from a career and school standpoint. So Isabel Myers' goal for the MBTI was really having people be aware of our differences so that MBTI can be a really good tool, as I said, for us to kind of understand each other in the workplace better, or in school and in life better, and really appreciating our gifts and our differences, right? So we all have uniqueness about us. We all have kind of superpowers, as I like to call them, that we bring to the table. and also knowing what our strengths and weaknesses are as well. So some really good resources that are out there. Gifts Differing is a great book by Isabel Briggs Myers. Last time I checked, it was also available digitally through libraries. So you may, if your library does offer free digital books or audio books, I've actually been able to access Gifts Differing both ways. Type Talk and Type Talk at Work are both very popular as well. And then there are some websites that can be really useful and helpful for you. Personality Page, Type Coach. With that, that is kind of an overview on the MBTI. And again, we'll get you your results next week. Later in the week, we will be covering the Strong Interest Inventory. So we'll see you online on Canvas.